I mostly read public domain books here on Glenn Reads Books to You, and they were written a long time ago, so they're usually racist, or sexist, or bigoted, but in there somewhere is a story, and that's why those stories are famous. Other times, I read works from independent authors, and they're delightfully not racist, but they might have adult language or adult situations, like, making sex. So that's your warning, but I'm sure you're grown up enough to handle it. Don't write to me complaining. God, I'm so tired. I'm getting no sleep at all ever since oh, God damn it. All right, fine, take a seat. I was just reflecting on the fact that ever since I started using the CPAP machine, I've basically been getting incremental amounts of no sleep at all. Maybe slightly more each day. I guess I'm just getting used to the abuse. But that and picking out the pubic hairs from my mouth every morning, I have not been enjoying this at all. Then people say, oh, why don't you get the mouth guard? Mouth guards don't keep you breathing. Apparently I gotta keep breathing. CPAP forces air down your throat like some kind of terrorist. How's a mouth guard gonna do that? I have no idea, but here I am with this thing on my face, rolling around, waking up every 5 seconds because the tube is like slapping me in the head, and then I try to go back to sleep, and then at the morning when you wake up, it goes, oh, you got a sleep score of 98. Oh, shut up. All you're doing is just trying to keep using this dumb thing. It doesn't help. But for some reason, I'm supposed to continue doing this. Everyone and their mother says, oh, you should do it, as if everyone's part of a cult, and it makes no sense. Welcome to the Glenn Reads Books to You mansion. It's a fun little bit where I pretend to live in a mansion and not just recording in my basement. This is where I read the hottest public domain books and short stories. This week, we're going to continue to read Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë. Want to learn about the author? Sure, I stole it from Wikipedia, so you might as well take the time to learn about it. Emily Brontë was born July 30th, 1818, and died December 19th, 1848. She's an English novelist and poet who is best known for her only novel, Wuthering Heights, now considered a classic of English literature. She also published a book of poetry with her sisters Charlotte and Anne, titled Poems by Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell, with their own poems finding regard as poetic genius. She died of tuberculosis, most likely caused by runoff water from a nearby graveyard. You want to hear some of historypress.co.uk fun facts? Sure. Emily Brontë is to thank for the Brontë sisters' books. By autumn of 1845, the Brontë sisters were all in Haworth and at low ebb, having failed in their attempts at work. It was then that Charlotte accidentally discovered Emily's hidden book of poetry. Charlotte knew about Emily's poetry, about Gondal, an imaginary land that she wrote about, but these were altogether different. Oh, they were powerful poems about Emily's innermost thoughts. After a huge argument, Emily was finally persuaded to send the poems to publishers with those of her sisters. The result, Poems by Currer, Ellis, and Acton Bell, was the first Brontë book. The rest is history. I love that she wrote a book about some imaginary land and she'd show that to people. Look at that. Now guess who's king now? Oh, you're going to love this. And everyone's like, oh, God, another one of these poems. Who writes epic poems about a fantasy world? And then they suddenly see like a real book of poetry about her real feelings and go, hey, why don't you let the world read this? She's like, oh, you screw off. And then they have a huge argument about it. Seems really strange. Well, that's good. With that, that's the grandfather clock telling me to shut up so we can go down to the library and read this book. So I'll meet you down there. Chapter 16. Oh, are you seated? Did you get yourself settled? Are you comfortable? Okay, good. Do you need anything? Okay? No? You're good? Oh, I see you brought your own snacks. I feel like I should warn you, this is going to be a long episode, so you can get up and leave anytime you want. I won't be offended. Do I want to read this much? No, but I got to get through these chapters. God damn it, or else this book's going to go on until next December. So I hope you brought enough snacks for everyone, because we're going to dive in, and this is going to be hours long. Okay, chapter 16. About 12 o'clock that night, was born the Catherine you saw at Wuthering Heights. Puny. 7 months child. And 2 hours after the mother died, oh, that was just thrown out there, having never recognized sufficient consciousness to Miss Heathcliff or no Edgar, the latter's distraction at the bereavement is a subject too painful to be dwelt on. Its after effects showed how deep the sorrow sunk. In great addition, in my eyes, was his being left without an heir. I bemoaned that as I gazed on the feeble orphan. Wow, this is not forgiving to the child or the mom. And I mentally abused old Linton for what was only natural partiality. The securing his estate... Oh, the cat's going crazy. The cat's got zoomies and he's screaming. Iggy, get out of here. Securing his estate to his own daughter instead of his son's. An unwelcomed infant it was. Poor thing! Exclamation point. It might have wailed out of life, and nobody cared a morsel. During those first hours of existence, we redeemed the neglect afterwards, but its beginning was as friendless as its end is likely to be. Next morning, bright and cheerful out of doors, Stoll softened in the through the blinds of the silent room and suffused the couch with its occupant with a mellow, tender glow. Edgar Linton had his head laid on the pillow and his eyes shut. His young and fair features were almost as deathlike as those of the form beside him, and almost as fixed, but his was the hush of exhausted anguish, and hers of perfect peace. Her brow smooth, her lids closed, her lips wearing the expression of a smile. No angel in heaven could be more beautiful than she appeared, and I partook of the infinite calm in which she lay. My mind was never in holier frame than when I gazed on that untroubled image of the divine rest. I instinctively echoed the words she had uttered a few hours before, incomparably beyond and above us all. Whether still on earth or now in heaven, her spirit is at home with God. Burp. I don't know if it be particularly me, but I am seldom otherwise than happy while watching the chamber of death. Should no frenzied or despairing mourner share the duty with me, I see a repose that neither earth nor hell can break, and I feel an assurance of the endless and shadowless hereafter, the eternity they have entered, where life is boundless in its duration, and love in its sympathy, and joy in its fullness. I notice that on occasion how much selfishness there is even in the love like Mr. Linton's, and when he so regretted Catherine's blessed release. Oh, exclamation point. To be sure, one might have doubted, after the wayward and impatient existence that had led, whether she merited a heaven of peace at last. And one might doubt in seasons of cold reflection, but not then, in the presence of her corpse. Oh, it asserted its own tranquility, which seemed to pledge of equal quiet to its former inhabitant. Do you believe such people are happy in the other world, sir? I'd give a great deal to know. I declined answering Miss Dean's question, which struck me as something heterodox. She proceeded, retracing the course of Catherine Linton. I fear we have no right to think she is, but we'll leave her with her maker. Wow, what a turd. The master looked asleep, and I ventured soon after sunrise to quit the room and steal out of the pure, refreshing air. The servants thought me gone to shake off drowsiness of my protracted watch. In reality, my chief motive was seeing Mr. Heathcliff. Oh, if he had remained among the larches all night, he would have heard nothing of the stir at the Grange, unless, perhaps, he might catch the gallop of the messenger going to Gimmerton. If he had come nearer, he would probably be aware from the lights flitting to and fro, and the opening and shutting of the outer doors. Oh, that all not right within. I wished, yet feared, to find him. I felt the terrible news must be told, and I longed to get it over. Oh, but how to do it? Oh, not to know. There was at least a few yards further in the park, leant against the old ash tree, his hat off, and his hair soaked with the dew. Oh, now the cat's here in front of the microphone. Can you find something else to do? I'm literally trying to read it now. You're sitting in front of my book. You can move your fat ass somewhere else. I'm sorry, buddy, but you have to go. Come on, move it. You literally have your anus right on the microphone. Come on, go. Down. Where the hell was I? Drowsiness, messenger, going to Gimmerton. If he had come nearer, he probably would be aware from the lights flitting to, for I already read that part. I wish, yet feared to find it. I felt the terrible news must be told, and I longed to get it over, but how to do it? I did not know. Oh, he was there, at least, a few yards further in the park, leaned against an old ash tree, his hat off, his hair soaked with the dew that had gathered on the budded branches and fell pattering around him. When he had been standing a long time in that position, for I saw a pair of owls passing and repassing scarcely 3 feet from him, busy in building their nest. And regarding his proximity, no more than that of a piece of timber. They flew off at my approach, and he raised his eyes and spoke. "She's dead," he said. "Well, I've not waited for you to learn that. Put your handkerchief away. Don't snivel before me. Damn you all. She wants none of your tears." I was weeping as much for him as for her. We do sometimes pity creatures that have none of the feeling either for themselves or others. And when I first looked into his face, I perceived that he had not got intelligence of the catastrophe, and a foolish notion struck me that his heart was quelled, and he prayed because his lips moved and his gaze was bent on the ground. "Yes, she's dead," I answered, checking my sobs and drying my cheeks. "Gone to heaven, I hope, where we may, everyone, join her, if we take due warning and leave our evil ways follow good." "Did she take due warning, then?" asked Heathcliff, attempting a sneer. "Did she die like a saint? Come on, give me a true history of the event. How did—" He endeavored to pronounce the name, but he could not manage it, and compressing his mouth he held a silent combat with his inward agony, defying meanwhile my sympathy with an unflinching ferocious stare. "How did she die?" he resumed, at last, fade notwithstanding his hardihood, and he had a support behind him, for after the struggle he trembled, in spite of himself, to his very finger ends. His fingertips? Finger ends? "Poor wretch," I thought, "you have a heart of nerves the same as your brother men. Why should you be anxious to conceal them? Your pride cannot blind God. You tempt him to writing them till he forces a cry of humiliation." "Quietly as a lamb," I answered aloud, and she drew a sigh and stretched herself like a child reviving and sinking again to sleep. And 5 minutes after, I felt one little pulse of her heart and nothing more. "And did she ever mention me?" he asked, hesitating as if he dreaded the answer to the question, would induce details that we did not bear to hear. Her senses never returned. She recognized nobody from the time you left her," I said. "She lies with a sweet smile on her face, and her latest ideas wander back to pleasant early days. Her life closed in a gentle dream. May she wake as kindly in the other world." "May she wake in torment," he cried with frightful vehemence, stamping his foot and groaning in a sudden paroxysm of ungovernable passion. "Why, she's a liar to the end. Where is she? Not there, not in heaven, not perished. Where? Oh, you said you cared nothing for my sufferings, and I pray one prayer. I repeat it till my tongue stiffens. Catherine Earnshaw, may you not rest as long as I am living. You said I killed you. Haunt me then, The murdered do haunt the murderers, I believe. I know that ghosts have wandered the earth. Be with me always. Take any form. I don't know, drive me mad. Only do not leave me in the abyss, where I cannot find you. Oh, God! It's unmutterable. I cannot live without my life. I cannot live without my soul." He dashed his head against a knot trunk and, lifting up his eyes, howled, not like a man, but like a, savage beast being goaded to death with knives and spears. I observed several splashes of blood about the bark of the tree, and his hand and forehead were both stained. Probably the scene I witnessed is a repetition of others acted out during the night. It hardly moved my compassion. It appalled me. Still, I felt reluctant to quit him so, but the moment he recollected himself enough to notice me watching, he thundered a command for me to go, and I obeyed. He was beyond my skill to quiet or console. Mrs. Linton's funeral was appointed to take the place on Friday following her decease. Until then, her coffin remained uncovered and strewn with flowers and scented leaves in the great drawing room. Linton spent his days and nights there, a sleepless guardian, and a circumstance concealed from all but me. Heathcliff spent his nights, at least, outside, equally a stranger to repose. I held no communication with him, still I was conscious of the design to enter, if he could. And on the Tuesday, a little after dark, when my master from sheer fatigue had been compelled to retire for a few hours, I went and opened one of the windows, moved by his perseverance to give him a chance of bestowing on the faded image of his idol one final adieu. He did not omit to avail himself of the opportunity cautiously and briefly, and too cautiously to betray his presence by the slightest noise. Indeed, I shouldn't have discovered that he had been there, except for the disarrangement of the drapery about the corpse's face, and for observing on the floor a curl of light hair fastened with a silver thread, which, on examination, I ascertained to have been taken from a locket hung around Catherine's neck. Heathcliff had opened the trinket and cast out its contents, replacing them with a black lock of his own. I twisted the two and enclosed them together. Ooh, how symbolic. Mr. Earnshaw was, of course, invited to attend the remains of his sister to the grave. He said no excuse, but he never came. So that, besides her husband, the mourners were wholly composed of tenants and servants. Isabella was not asked. Really? Why? What the hell? The place of Catherine's interment, to the surprise of the villagers, was neither in the chapel under the carved monument or the lintons, nor yet by the tombs of her own relations. Outside, it was dug on a green slope in the corner of the kirkyard, where the wall is so low that heath and bilberry plants have climbed over it from the moor, and the peat mold almost buries it. Her husband lies in the same spot now, and they each have a simple headstone above and a plain gray block at their feet to mark the graves. Chapter 17. That Friday made the last of our fine days for the month. In the evening, the weather broke, and the wind shifted from south to northeast, and brought rain first, and then sleet, and then snow. On the morrow, one could hardly imagine that there had been 3 weeks of summer. The primroses and crocuses were hidden under wintry drifts. The larks were silent. The young leaves on the early trees smitten and blackened, and the dreary and chill and dismal that morrow did creep over. My master kept his room. I took possession of a lonely parlor, converting it into a nursery, and there I was, sitting on the mourning doll of a child laid on my knee, rocking it to and fro, and watching her, meanwhile, the still driving flakes build up in the uncurtained window. When the door opened, and some person entered, out of breath and laughing. Oh, my anger was greater than my astonishment for a minute. I supposed it to be one of the maids, and I cried, "Have done, How dare you show your giddiness here? And what would Mr. Linton say if he heard you?" "Excuse me," answered a familiar voice, "but I know Edgar is in bed, and I cannot stop myself." With that, the speaker came forward to the fire, panting, and holding her hand to her side. "I have run the whole way from Wuthering Heights," she continued after a pause, "except that where I've flown, I couldn't count the number of falls I had. Oh, and I'm aching all over. Don't be alarmed. There should be an explanation as soon as I can give it. Only just have the goodness to step out and order the carriage to take me on to Gimmerton, and to tell a servant to seek up a few clothes in my wardrobe." The intruder was Mrs. Heathcliff. Oh, she certainly seemed in no laughing predicament. Her hair streamed on her shoulders, dripping with snow and water, as she was dressed in the girlish dress that she commonly wore, befitting her age more than her position. A low frock with short sleeves, and nothing on either head or neck. The frock was of a light silk, and clung to her, wet, and her feet were protected merely by thin slippers. Add this to the deep cut under one ear, which could only be prevented from bleeding profusely, the white face scratched and bruised, and a frame hardly able to support itself through fatigue. And you may fancy my first fright was not much allayed when I had leisure to examine her. My dear young lady," I exclaimed, "I'll stir nowhere and hear nothing till you have removed every article of your clothes," oh, this is getting weird, "and put on dry things. And certainly you shall not go to Gimmerton tonight, so it's needless to order the carriage." "I certainly shall," she said, "walking or riding, yet I've no objection to dress myself decently. And, see how it flows down my neck now? The fire does make it smart." She insisted on my fulfilling her directions before she would let me touch her. This is getting weird. And not till after the coachman had been instructed to get ready and a maid set to pack up some necessary attire. I did obtain her consent for binding and wound, helping to change her garments. Now, Ellen, she said, when my task was finished and she was seated in an easy chair on the hearth with a cup of tea before, you sit down opposite me and put poor Catherine's baby away. I don't like to see it. Oh, you mustn't think I care little for Catherine because I behaved so foolishly on entry. I've cried, too, bitterly, yes, more than anyone else has reason to cry. We parted unreconciled, you remember, and I shan't forgive myself. But for all that, I was not going to sympathize with him, the brute beast. Oh, give me the poker. This is the last thing of this I have about me. She slipped the gold ring from her third finger and threw it on the floor. I'll smash it, she continued, striking it with childish spite. Oh, and then I'll burn it. And then she took it and dropped a misused article among the coals. There. And I shall buy another. If he gets me back again, he'd be capable of coming to see me. To tease Edgar. I dare not say, lest that notion should possess his wicked head. Oh, and besides, Edgar has not been kind, has he? And I won't come suing for his assistance, nor will I bring him into more trouble. Necessity compelled me to seek shelter here, though if I had not learnt he was out of the way, I'd have halted at the kitchen, washed my face, warmed myself, got you to bring what I wanted, and departed again to anywhere out of the reach of my accursed, of that incarnate goblin. He wasn't such a fury. If he'd have caught me, it's a pity Earnshaw is not matched in strength. Oh, I wouldn't have run till I'd see him all but demolished and had hiddenly been able to do it. Don't talk so fast, miss, I interrupted. You'll disorder the handkerchief I have tied round your face and make the cut bleed again. Drink your tea and take your breath and give over laughing. Laughter is sadly out of place under this roof and in your condition. An undeniable truth, she replied. Listen to that child. It maintains a constant wail. Send it out of my hearing for an hour. I shan't stay any longer. I rang the bell and committed it to a servant's care, and then I inquired what had urged her to escape from Wuthering Heights in such an unlikely plight, and where she meant to go, as if she refused remaining with us. I ought, and I wish to remain, answered she, to cheer Edgar and to take care of the baby for two things, and because the Grange is my right home. But I tell you, he wouldn't let me. Do you think he could bear to see me grow fat and marry? Could he bear to think that we were tranquil and not resolve on poisoning our comfort? Now I have satisfaction in being sure that he detests me, to the point of its annoying him seriously to have me within earshot or eyesight. I notice when I enter his presence, the muscles of his countenance are involuntarily distorted to the expression of hatred, partially arising from the knowledge of the good causes I have to feel from sentiment for him, and partially from the original aversion. It is strong enough to make me feel pretty certain that he'd not chase me over England, supposing I could drive to clear escape, and therefore I must get quite away. I've recovered from my first desire to be killed by him. I'd rather he kill himself, And he has extinguished my love effectually, and so I am at ease. I can recollect yet how I loved him, and how can dimly imagine that I could still be loving him, even if he had doted on me. The devilish nature would have been revealed in its existence somehow. Catherine had an awfully perverted taste to esteem him so dearly, knowing him so well. Monster! Would that he could be blotted out of creation and out of my memory. Hush, he's a human being, I said. Be more charitable. There are worse men than he is yet. He is not a human being, she retorted. He has no claim on my charity. I gave him my heart, and he took it and pinched it to death and flung it back to me. People feel with their hearts, Ellen, and since he has destroyed mine, I have not the power to feel for him. I would not, though he groaned for his dying day and wept tears of blood for Catherine. No, indeed, I wouldn't. Here, Isabella began to cry, but immediately dashing the water from her lashes, she recommenced. Oh, you asked what has driven me to flight at last? I was compelled to attempt it, because I had succeeded in rousing his rage a pitch above his malignity. Pulling out the nerves with red-hot pincers requires more coolness than knocking on the head. Burp, he has worked up to forget the fiendish prudence he boasted of and proceeded to murderous violence. I experienced pleasure in being able to exasperate him. The sense of pleasure woke my instinct of self-preservation, so I fairly broke free, and if ever I come into his hands again, he is welcome to signal revenge. Yesterday, Mr. Earnshaw would have been at the funeral. He kept himself sober for purpose, tolerably sober, not going to bed mad at 6 o'clock and getting up drunk at 12. Consequently, he rose in suicidal low spirits, as fit for church as for a dance. And instead, he sat down by the fire and swallowed gin or brandy by tumblerfuls. Heathcliff, I shudder to name him, has been a stranger in the house since last Sunday till today. Whether the angels have fed him or his kin beneath, I cannot tell, but he has not eaten a meal with us for, nearly a week. He has come home at dawn and gone upstairs to his chamber, locking himself in, as if anybody dreamt of coveting his company! ! There are, he has continued, praying like a Methodist. Only the deity he implored is senseless, dust and ashes, and God, when addressed, was curiously confounded with his own black father. What the hell? After concluding these precious orisons? What does that mean? Prayer. Okay, well, that was a waste of everyone's time. I'd like to apologize for that. And they lasted generally till he grew hoarse and his voice was strangled in his throat. Oh, you'd be off again, always straight down to the Grange. I wonder Edgar did not send for a constable and give him into custody. For me, grieved as I was about Catherine, it was impossible to avoid regarding this season of deliverance from degrading opposition as a holiday. I recovered spirits sufficient to hear Joseph's eternal lectures without weeping, and to move up and down the house less with the foot of a frightened thief than formerly. You wouldn't think that I should cry at anything Joseph could say, but he and Hareton are detestable companions. I'd rather sit with Hindley and hear his awful talk than with T, little Maester. Oh, God, don't do that again. And his staunch supporter, that odious old man. When Heathcliff is in, I'm often obliged to seek the kitchen in their society, or starve among the damp, uninhabited chambers. When he's not, as was the case last week, I establish a table and a chair at a corner of the house fire, and never mind how Mr. Earnshaw may occupy himself, and he does not interfere with my arrangements. He's quieter now than he used to be, if no one provokes him, more sullen and depressed, and less furious. Joseph affirms that he's sure he's an altered man, and that the Lord has touched his heart, and that he's saved so by fire. I'm puzzled to detect signs of the favorable change, but it is not my business. Yester evening, I sat in my nook, reading some old books till late on toward 12. And it seemed so dismal to go upstairs, the wild snow blowing outside, and my thoughts continually reverting to the kirkyard and the new-made grave! I dared hardly lift my eyes from the page before me, that melancholy scene so instantly usurped its place. Hindley sat opposite. His head leaned against his hand. I can't read that. I'm going to say it again. His head leaned on his hand, perhaps meditating on the same subject. I ceased drinking at this point below rationality, and had neither stirred nor spoken during 2 or 3 hours. Well, there's no sound in the house but the moaning of the wind, which shook the windows every now and then, and the faint crackling of the coals, and the click of my snuffers as I removed at intervals the long wick of the candle. Hareton and Joseph were probably, fast asleep in bed. It was very, very sad. And while I read, I sighed, for it seemed as if all joy had vanished from the world, never to be restored. The doleful silence was broken at length by the sound of the kitchen latch. Heathcliff had returned from his watch earlier than usual, owing, I suppose, to the sudden storm. That entrance was fastened, and we heard him coming round to get in by the other. I rose with an irrepressible expression of what I felt on my lips, which induced my companion, who had been starting towards the door, to turn and look at me. I'll keep him out 5 minutes, he exclaimed. You won't object? No, but you may keep him out the whole night for me, I answered. Do put the key in the lock and draw the bolts. Burp. Earnshaw accompanied this ere his guest reached the front, and then came and brought his chair to the other side of my table, leaning over it and searching in my eyes for sympathy with the burning hate that gleamed from his, as he both looked and felt like an assassin. He couldn't exactly find that, but he discovered enough to encourage him to speak. You and I, he said, have each a great debt to settle with the other man out yonder. And if we were neither of us cowards, we might combine to discharge her. Are you as soft as your brother? Are you willing to endure to the last and not once attempt a repayment? Oh, I'm weary of enduring now, I replied, and I'd be glad of a retaliation if they wouldn't recoil on myself. But treachery and violence are spears pointed at both ends, and they wound those who resort to them worse than their enemies. Yeah, treachery and violence are just a return for treachery and violence, cried Hindley. Mrs. Heathcliff, I'll ask you to do nothing but sit still and be dumb. Tell me now, can you? I'm sure you could have as much pleasure as I in witnessing the conclusion of the fiend's existence. He'll be your death unless you overreach him, and he'll be my ruin. Damn the hellish villain! He knocks at the door as if you were master here already. Promise to hold your tongue, and before that clock strikes, it wants 3 minutes of one. You're a free woman! Exclamation point. Oh, he took the implements which I described to you in my letter from his breast, and he would have turned down his candle. I snatched it away, however, and seized his arm. Oh, I'll not hold my tongue, I said. You mustn't touch him. Let that door remain shut, and be quiet. No, I've formed my resolution, and by God, I'll execute it, cried the desperate being. Oh, I'll do you a kindness in spite of yourself, and inherit justice. Oh, you needn't trouble your head to screen me. Catherine is gone. Nobody alive would regret me, or be ashamed, though I cut my throat this minute. And it's time to make an end. Well, I might as well have struggled with a bear, or reasoned with a lunatic. And the only resource left to me was to run to a lattice and warn his intended victim of the fate which awaited him. You better seek shelter somewhere else tonight, I exclaimed in a rather triumphant tone. Mr. Earnshaw has a mind to shoot you, if you persist in endeavoring to enter. Oh, you had better open the door, you, he answered, addressing me by some elegant term, which I don't care to repeat. Oh, I shall not... What does that mean? Oh, you dash. Oh, he probably said a swear word. Probably starting with the letter B. Rhyming with bitch. Okay. Addressed me by saying, okay, all right. Why should I meddle in the matter? I retorted again. Come in and get shot, if you please. I've done my duty. With that, I shut the window and returned to my place by the fire, having too small a stock of hypocrisy at my command to pretend any anxiety for the danger that menaced him. Earnshaw swore passionately at me, affirming that I loved the villain yet, and calling me all sorts of names for the base spirit I evinced. And I, in my secret heart, and conscience never reproached me, thought, what a blessing it'd be for him, should Heathcliff put him out of misery, what a blessing for me, should he send Heathcliff to his right abode. As I sat nursing these reflections, the casement behind me was banged on to the floor by a blow from the latter individual, and his lack of countenance looked blightingly through. All the stanchions stood too close to suffer his shoulders to follow, and I smiled, exulting in my fancied security. His hair and clothes were whitened with snow. Oh, and his sharp cannibal teeth. Oh, they revealed by cold and wrath. Oh, gleamed through the dark. Isabella, let me in, or I'll make you repent. He gurned. Why is gurned in quotes? So it says, quote, Isabella, let me in, or I'll make you repent. End quote. He gurned. Oh, as Joseph calls it. That's confusing. I cannot commit murder, I replied. Mr. Hindley stands sentinel with a knife and a loaded pistol. "Let me in by the kitchen door," he said. "Hindley will be there before me," I answered. And that's a poor love of yours that cannot bear to bear a shower of snow. We were left at peace in our beds as long as the summer moon shone, but the moment a blast of winter returns, you must run for shelter. Heathcliff, if I were you, I'd go stretch myself over her grave and die like a faithful duck. The world is surely not living in now, is it? You should distinctly impress upon me the idea that Catherine was the whole joy of your life. I can't imagine how you'd think of surviving her loss." "He's there, isn't he?" exclaimed my companion, rushing to the gap. If I can get my arm out, I can hit him." He's like stretching his arm through this small window thing, like, just get him close to me, I'm going to punch him. "And I'm afraid, Ellen, you'll set me down as really wicked, but you don't know all, so don't judge. I wouldn't have aided or abetted an attempt on even his life for anything. Wish that he were dead, I must. And therefore I was fearfully disappointed and unnerved by terror for the consequences of my taunting speech, and he flung himself at Earnshaw's weapon and wrenched it from his grasp. The charge exploded, and the knife, in springing back, closed into its owner's wrist. Heathcliff pulled it away by main force, slitting up the flesh as it passed on, and thrust it dripping into his pocket. And then he took a stone and struck down the division between the two windows. That's all it takes, just a little stone. And he sprang in. His adversary had fallen senseless with a sense of pain, and the flow of blood that gushed from his artery, or large vein. The ruffian kicked and trampled on him and dashed his head repeatedly against the flags, holding me with one hand, meantime, to prevent me summoning Joseph. He exerted preterhuman. Okay, I've never actually seen preterhuman written out in letters before. Preterhuman. I think I know what it means, just like superhuman, but let's just take a look at what that means. Nothing. Okay, well, thanks, Kindle, for nothing. Self-denial and abstaining from finishing him completely. But getting out of breath, he finally detested and dragged the apparently inanimate body onto the settle. There he tore off the sleeve of Earnshaw's coat and bound up the wound with brutal roughness, splitting, cursing during the operation as energetically as he had kicked before. Being at liberty, I lost no time in seeking the old servant, who, having gathered by degrees the purport of my hasty tale, hurried below, gasping as he descended the steps, two at once. Oh, what an athlete. I like to think I'm an athlete whenever I ascend or descend stairs two at once when I'm in a hurry. I like to think that it takes a special kind of man to do that with his legs. What is there to do now? What is THER there to do now? He says. There's this to do, thundered Heathcliff, that your master's mad, and should he last another month, I will have him to an asylum. And how the devil did you come to fasten me up, you toothless hound? Don't stand muttering and mumbling there. Come, I'm not going to nurse him. Wash that stuff away, and mind the sparks of your candle. It's more than half brandy. And so ye've been mothering on him, exclaimed Joseph, lifting his hands, his eyes in horror. If ever I see the seeing it like this, may the Lord. Heathcliff gave him a push onto his knees and in the middle of the blood and flung a towel to him. But instead of proceeding to dry it up, he joined his hands and began a prayer, which excited my laughter from its odd phraseology. I was in the condition of mind to be shocked at nothing. In fact, I was as reckless as some malefactors show themselves at the foot of the gallows. I forgot you, said the tyrant. You shall do that. Down with you. And you conspire with him against me, do you? Viper! There! Is this work fit for you? He shook me till my teeth rattled, and pitched me beside Joseph, who steadily concluded his supplications, and then rose, vowing he would set off for the Grange, directly. Mr. Linton was a magistrate, and though he had 50 wives dead, he should inquire into this. Oh, he was so obstinate in his resolution. He has 50 wives. He's so obstinate in his resolution that Heathcliff deemed it expedient to compel from my lips a recapitulation of what had taken place. Standing over me, heaving with malevolence, as I reluctantly delivered the account in answer to his questions. Oh, it required a great deal of labor to satisfy the old man that Heathcliff was not the aggressor, especially with my hardly wrung reply. However, Mr. Earnshaw soon convinced him that he was alive still. Joseph hastened to administer a dose of spirits, and by their succour his master presently regained motion and consciousness. Heathcliff, aware that his opponent was ignorant of the treatment received while insensible, called him deliriously intoxicated, and said that he should not notice his atrocious conduct further, but advised him to get to bed. To my joy he left us, and after giving this judicious counsel, and Hindley stretched himself on the hearthstone, I departed to my own room, marveling that I had escaped so easily. This morning, when I came down, about half an hour before noon, Mr. Earnshaw was sitting by the fire, deadly sick. His evil genius, almost as gaunt and ghastly, leaned against the chimney. Neither appeared inclined to dine, and having waited till all was cold on the table, I commenced alone. Nothing hindered me from eating heartily, as I experienced a certain sense of satisfaction and superiority, as at intervals I cast a look toward my silent companions, and felt the comfort of quiet conscience within me. After I had gone, I ventured on the unusual liberty of drawing near the fire, going round Earnshaw's seat, and kneeling in the corner beside them. Heathcliff did not glance my way, and I glanced up, and contemplated his features almost as confidently as they had been turned to stone. His forehead, that I once thought so manly, and that I now think so diabolical, was shaded with a heavy cloud. His basilisk eyes were nearly quenched by sleeplessness, and weeping, perhaps, for the lashes were wet then. His lips, devoid of their ferocious sneer, and sealed in an expression of unspeakable sadness. Had it been another, I would have covered my face in the presence of such grief. In his case, I was gratified, and ignoble as it seems as an insult to fallen enemy. I couldn't miss this chance of sticking in a dart. His weakness was the only time when I could taste the delight of paying wrong for wrong. Fee, miss, I interrupted. One might suppose that you had never opened a Bible in all your life. If God afflicts your enemies, surely that ought to suffice you. If it both mean and presumptuous to add your torture to his? In general, I'll allow that it would be, Ellen, he continued, but what misery laid on Heathcliff could content me. Unless I have a hand in it, I'd rather be suffered less, if I might cause his sufferings, and might know that I was the cause. I owe him so much, only on one condition that I could hope to forgive him. It is, if I may, take an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. For every wrench of agony, return a wrench. Reduce him to my level, as he was the first to injure. Make him the first to employ pardon, and then, Ellen, I might show you some generosity. But it's utterly impossible I could ever be revenged, and therefore I cannot forgive him. Hindley wanted some water, and I handed him a glass, and asked him how he was. Not as ill as I wish, he replied, but leaving out an arm, every inch of me is as sore as if I had been fighting with a legion of imps. Yes, no wonder, was my next remark. Catherine used to boast that she stood between you and bodily harm. She meant that certain persons would not hurt you for fear of offending her. Well, it's well that people don't really rise from their grave. Last night, she might have witnessed a repulsive scene. Are you not bruised and cut over your chest and shoulders? Well, I can't say, he answered. But what do you mean? Did he dare to strike me when I was down? He trampled down and kicked you and dashed you on the ground, I whispered. His mouth watered to tear you with his teeth, because he's only half a man, and not so much, and the rest fiend. Oh, Mr. Earnshaw looked up, like me, to the countenance of our mutual foe, who, absorbed in his anguish, seemed insensible to anything around him. Oh, the longer he stood, the plainer his reflections revealed their blackness through his features. Oh, if God would only but give me the strength to strangle him in my last agony, I'd go to hell with joy, groaned the impatient man, writhing to rise and sinking back into spirit, convinced of his inadequacy for the struggle. Nay, it's enough that he has murdered one of you, I observed aloud. At the Grange, everyone knows your sister would have been living now had it not been for Mr. Heathcliff. After all, it is preferable to be hated than loved by him. Oh, when I recollect how happy we were, how happy Catherine was before he came. Oh, I'm fit to curse day. Most likely Heathcliff noticed more the truth of what was said than the spirit of the person who said it. His attention was roused, I saw, for his eyes strained down tears among the ashes. He drew his breath in suffocating sighs, and I stared full at him and laughed, scornfully, and the clouded windows of hell flashed a moment toward me. Oh, the fiend, which usually looked out, however, was so dimmed and drowned that I did not fear to hazard another sound of derision. Get up and begone out of my sight, said the mourner. Oh, I guessed he uttered those words, at least, though his voice was hardly intelligible. I beg your pardon, I replied, but I love Catherine too, and her brother requires attendance, which, for her sake, I shall supply. Now that she's dead, I see her in Hindley. Hindley has exactly her eyes, if you've not tried to gouge them out, and made them black and red, and her, get up, wretched idiot, before I stamp you to death, he cried, making a movement which caused me to make one also. But then, I continued, holding myself ready to flee, if poor Catherine had trusted you and assumed the ridiculous, contemptible, degrading title of Mrs. Heathcliff, she would have soon have presented a similar picture. She wouldn't have borne you abominable behavior quietly. Her detestation and disgust must have found voice. The back of the settle in Ershaw's person interposed between me and him, so instead of endeavoring to reach me, he snatched a dinner knife from the table. And he flung it at my head. It struck beneath my ear and stopped the sentence I was uttering, but pulling it out, it was stuck in her head, and she pulled it out. I sprang to the door and delivered another, which I hope went a little deeper than his missile. The last glimpse I caught of him was a furious rush on his part, checked by the embrace of the host, and both fell locked together on the hearth. In my flight through the kitchen, I bid Joseph speed to his master. I knocked over Hareton, who was hanging a litter of puppies from a chair back in the doorway. What's with hanging all the puppies? People are always suspending puppies for some reason in this book. And, blessed as a soul escaped from purgatory, I bound, leapt, and flew down the steep road. Then, quitting its windings, shot direct across the moor, rolling over banks and wading through marshes, precipitating myself, in fact, toward the beacon light of the Grange. And far farther would I be condemned to perpetual dwelling of the infernal regions than, even for one night, abide beneath the roof of Wuthering Heights. Oh, that one slipped out. Wuthering Heights again. Isabella ceased speaking and took a drink of tea. And then she rose, and bidding me put on her bonnet and a great shawl I had bought, and turning a deaf ear to my entreaties for her to remain for another hour, she stepped onto a chair, kissed Edgar's and Catherine's portraits, weird, bestowed a similar salute on me, a salute or a kiss? She's kissing portraits and the man in the bed, and descended to the carriage, accompanied by Fanny, who yelped wild with joy at recovering her mistress. Oh, she was driven away, never to revisit this neighborhood, but a regular correspondence was established between her and my master when things were more settled. I believe her new abode was in the south, near London. There she had a son born a few months subsequent to her escape. He was christened Linton, and from the first she reported him to be an ailing, peevish creature. Mr. Heathcliff, meeting me one day in the village, inquired where she lived. I refused to tell. I remarked that it was not of any moment, only she must be aware of coming to her brother. She should not be with him, and if he had to keep her to himself, though I would give no information, he discovered through some other sort of servants both her place of residence and the existence of the child. Still, he didn't molest her. For which forbearance might thank his aversion. I suppose he often asked about the enfant when he saw me, and bearing its name, smiled grimly and observed, "Oh, they wish me to hate it too, do they? Yeah. I don't think they wish you to know anything about it," I answered. But I have it," he said, "when I want it, and they may reckon on that." Fortunately, its mother died before the time arrived, some 13 years after the decease of Catherine, when Linton was 12 or a little more. On the day succeeding Isabella's unexpected visit, I had no opportunity of speaking to my master. Oh, he shunned conversation and was fit for discussing nothing. And when I could get him to listen, I saw it pleased him that his sister had left her husband, whom he abhorred with an intensity which the mildness of his nature could scarcely seem to allow. So deep and sensitive was his aversion that he refrained from going anywhere From going anywhere where in two spots. She's a very good writer, but this is the first time I've seen her double up words, and I hate it when people double up words. Sorry, I lost my place. My destination. And so he says, if going anywhere where he was likely to see or hear Heathcliff. Grief, and that together transformed him into a complete hermit. Oh, he threw up his office of magistrate, ceased to even attend the church, avoided the village on all occasions, and spent a life of entire seclusion within the limits of his park and grounds, only varied by solitary rambles on the moors and visits to the grave of his wife, mostly at evening or early morning before the other wanderers abroad. But he was too good to be thoroughly unhappy long. He didn't pray for Catherine's soul to haunt him. Time brought resignation and a melancholy sweeter than common joy. He recalled her memory with ardent, tender love and hopeful aspiring to a better world where he doubted that she was not gone. And he had earthly consolation and affections also. For a few days, I said, he seemed regardless of the puny successor to the departed. That coldness melted as fast as snow in April, and ere the tiny thing could stammer a word or totter a step, it welded a despot's scepter in its heart, and he was named Catherine. But he was never called it by its name in full, as he had never called the first Catherine short, probably because Heathcliff had a habit of doing so. The little one was always Cathy, and it formed to him the distinction from the mother, and yet a connection with her. His attachment sprang from its retaliation to her far more than from his own being. I used to draw a comparison between him and Hindley and Earnshaw and perplex myself to explain satisfactorily why their contact was so opposite in similar circumstances. Oh, they had both been fond husbands, and both attached to their children. And I could not see how they shouldn't both have taken the same road, for good or evil, but I thought in my mind Hindley, with apparently the stronger head, was showing himself sadly the worse and weaker man. When his ship struck, the captain abandoned his post, and the crew, instead of trying to save her, rushed into a riot of confusion, leaving no hope of their luckless vessel. Linton, on the contrary, displayed a true courage of loyal and faithful soul. He trusted God, and God comforted him. And one hoped and the other despaired that they chose their own lots and were righteously doomed to endure them. But you'll not want to hear my moralizing. Mr. Lockwood, you'll judge as well as I can all these things, at least that you think you will at the same. And the end of Mr. Earnshaw was what might have been expected. He followed fast on the sisters. There were scarcely 6 months between them. We, at the Grange, never got very succinct account of the state preceding it. All that I did learn was on occasion of going to aid in the preparations for the funeral. Mr. Kenneth came to announce the event to my master. "Well, Nellie," he said, riding into the yard one morning too early not to alarm me with instant presentiment of bad news. "It's yours, my turn to go into mourning at present. Who's given us the slip now, do you think? Who announces a death this way?" Who just rides in on a horse? Ha ha ha, well, it's our turn to go in the morning. Who do you think gave us a slip this time? What the hell? Who? I asked in a flurry. Why, guess. This is horrible. Somebody died. He returned, dismounting and slinging his bridle on a hook by the door. And nip up the corner of your apron. I'm certain you'll need it. What kind of dick is this? Now, Mr. Heathcliff, surely, I exclaimed. What? Would you have tears for him? Said the doctor. No, Heathcliff's a tough young fellow. He looks blooming today. I just seen him. He's rapidly regaining flesh since he lost his better half. Who is it, Mr. Kenneth? I repeated impatiently. Who makes someone guess at who died? Prepare to cry. Someone you loved is gone. Guess. That's horrible. Who is it, Mr. Kenneth? I repeated impatiently. Hindley Earnshaw, your old friend Hindley, he replied. My wicked gossip, though he's been too wild for me this long while. I said we should draw water, but cheer up. He died true to his character, drunk as a lord. Poor lad. I'm sorry, too. One can't help missing an old companion, though he had the worst tricks with him that ever a man imagined, and he has done me many a rascally turn. Yeah, he's barely 27, it seems, and that's your own age. Oh, who would have thought you were born in 1 year? Oh, good, the cat's here. Are you stepping all over the keys of the laptop, you pile of shit? I confess this blow was greater to me than the shock of Mrs. Linton's death. Well, good thing that she had it delivered by an asshole. Ancient associations lingered round my heart. I sat down on the porch and wept, as for a blood relation, desiring Mr. Kenneth to get another servant to introduce him to the master. I could not hinder myself from pondering on the question. Had he had a fair play? Whatever I did, that idea would bother me. It was so tiresomely pertinacious. I'm looking it up. This is a word that no human says now. Pertinacious. Holding firmly to an opinion or a course of action. Then I resolved on requesting to leave to go to Wuthering Heights and assist in the last duties of the dead. Mr. Linton was extremely reluctant to consent, but I pleaded eloquently on the friendliness condition on which he had laid, and I said to my old master and foster brother had a claim on my services as strong as his own. Besides, I reminded him that the child Hareton, was his wife's nephew, and in the absence of a near kin, he ought to act as its guardian, and he ought to and must inquire how the property was left, and look over the concerns of his brother-in-law. He was unfit for attending such matters then, but he bid me speak to his lawyer, and at length permitted me to go. His lawyer had been Mr. Earnshaw's also. I called at the village, and I asked to, sorry, I'm reading this, and this cat is literally biting my legs. Stop biting my fucking legs. No one's going to love you when you bite people. Idiot! But he bid me speak to his lawyer, and Heathcliff should be left alone. Affirming, in truth, were known, Hareton would be found a little less than a beggar. His father died in debt, he said. The whole property is mortgaged, and the sole chance for the natural heir is to allow him an opportunity for creating some interest in the creditor's heart, that he may be inclined to deal leniently toward him. When I reached the Heights, I explained that I had come to see everything carried on decently, and Joseph, who appeared in sufficient distress, expressed satisfaction at my presence. Mr. Heathcliff said he did not perceive that I was wanted, but I might stay in order that the arrangements for the funeral if I chose. Correctly, I remarked. That fool's body should be buried at the crossroads, without ceremony of any kind. I happened to leave him 10 minutes yesterday afternoon, and in that interval he fastened the 2 doors of the house against me, and he has spent the night in drinking himself to death, deliberately. We woke in the morning, for we heard him snorting like a horse. Yeah, and there he was, laid over the settle, flaying and scalping. You would not have wakened him. I sent for Kenneth, and he came, but not till the beast had charged the carrion. He was both dead and cold and stark, and so you'll allow it was useless making more stir about him. Well, the old servant confirmed his statement, but he muttered, this is also a very inelegant way of talking about how someone died. I'd rather, Rayther, he'd gone hisslin' for the doctor. I sud hath 10. I'm not reading that. I hate it when they write like that. I insisted on the funeral being respectable. Mr. Heathcliff said that I have my own way there too, only he desired me to remember that the money for the whole affair came out of his pocket. He maintained a hard, careless deportment, indicative of neither joy nor sorrow. If anything, it expressed a flinty gratification at a piece of difficult work successfully executed. Well, I observed once, indeed, something like exultation in his aspect. Oh, it was just when the people were bearing the coffin from his house, he had the hypocrisy to represent the mourner. Oh, and previous to following with Hareton, he lifted the unfortunate child onto the table and muttered with particular gusto, "Now, my bonny lad, you are mine. And we'll see if one tree won't grow as crooked as another, and with the same wind and twist it." The unsuspecting thing, pleased at his speech, he played with Heathcliff's whiskers and stroked his cheek, but I divined its meaning and observed tartly, "That boy must go back with me to Thrushcross Grange. Sir, there is nothing in the world less yours than he is." "Does Linton say so?" he demanded. "Of course. He has ordered me to take him," I replied. "Well," said the scoundrel, "well, we'll not argue on the subject now, but I have a fancy to try my hand at rearing a young one, so intimate to your master that I must supply the place of his with my own. If he attempt to remove it, I don't engage to let Hareton go undisputed, but I'll be pretty sure to make the other come. Remember to tell him." This hint was enough to bind our hands. I repeated its substance on my return, and Edgar Linton, little interested at the commencement, spoke no more of interfering, and I am not aware that he could have done with any purpose, had he been ever so willing. The guest was now the master of Wuthering Heights. He held a firm possession, and proved to the attorney, who, in his turn, proved to Mr. Linton that Earnshaw had mortgaged every yard of land he owned for cash to supply his own mania for gaming, and he, Heathcliff, was the mortgagee. In that manner, Hareton should now be the first gentleman in the neighborhood, who, reduced to a state of complete dependence on his father's inveterate enemy, and lives in his own house as a servant, deprived of the advantage of wages, quite unable to right himself because of his friendliness, and his ignorance that he has been wronged. Well, with that, it seems like good times any. Get the heck out of here. It's been over an hour that I've been reading, and we're just going to keep cramming through until we get to chapter 20. So why don't we go down to the basement, take a little break. You can just relax underneath a naked light bulb in a folding chair while I play guitar to you and let you know about the latest upcoming books from Penguin Random House. Now, there you are. See, you made your way down. Take a seat here in the folding chair in my basement underneath that naked light bulb, and I'll stand underneath this one, and I can read to you about a new upcoming Penguin Random House book while I play this guitar to you. Listen. Yes. Boy, is this a long one. We're already an hour in, and I've hit the halfway mark. You might think, well, I've gotten this far. I might as well keep listening. But boy, is it boring. And I say to you, yes, because I'm the one that's got to actually read this for 2 hours. That's what I get when I'm trying to move on and read other books. Nobody's Angel by Jack Clark. Category, noir novels. About Nobody's Angel? Sure. Quentin Tarantino on Nobody's Angel. My favorite fiction novel this year was written by a taxi driver who used to hand it out to his passengers. It's a terrific story and character study of a cabbie in Chicago during a time when a serial killer is robbing and murdering cabbies. Kudos to Hard Case Crime for publishing Mr. Clark's book. Then in all caps, 2 killers stalk the streets of Chicago. Can one taxi driver corner them both? Eddie Miles is one of a dying breed. A Windy City hack who knows every street and every back alley of his beloved city and takes its recent descent into violence personally. But what can one driver do about a killer targeting streetwalkers or another terrorizing cabbies? Precious little, until the night he witnesses one of them in action. And that's the end of that review. You want to hear some praise? Might as well. That was really short. The Washington Post writes, "Nobody's Angel," in all caps, "is a gem. Oh, it's just about perfect." So, Chicago Sun-Times on Nobody's Angel, "Heartbreaking, captivating. Each page turn feels like real, authentic Chicago." Book list on Nobody's Angel, "The cynical, melancholy cabbie point of view is perfect for this kind of neon-lit, noir-tinged, saxophone-scored prose poem." They should not have put this review in here. And Clark hits all the right notes. Yeah, they should have just left that one out. Publishers Weekly on Nobody's Angels, in brackets, the letter A in all caps, "Slim, sparse, and heartbreaking novel." Why'd you bother writing a review? Then a fast-moving thriller from one seat-of-the-pants ride to the next. From Kirkus Reviews. Well, you can get Nobody's Angel by Jack Clark at paperback for $15.95. Oh, good for him. I like a guy who used to hand out this book to other people in his cab, just trying to get anyone to read it. Instead of going hardcover, just straight to paperback, making sure it's accessible to everyone. Paperback for $15.95 February 13th, 2024 from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, Bookshop.org, Hudson Booksellers, Powell's, Target, and you know that when you are shopping for a giant tub of cheese balls, you might see this sitting on the shelves and think, yes, perhaps I will, at Walmart. Well, with that, why don't we go back upstairs and just keep reading for the longest episode I've ever recorded in my entire life? Sure. Yeah, I'll see you up there. Okay, yeah, I see you. Why don't you just sit down? We got to hurry up and get through this. Chapter 18. "The 12 years," continued Miss Dean, "following that dismal period were the happiest of my life. My greatest troubles in their passage rose from our little lady's trifling illnesses, which she had to experience in common with all children, rich and poor. For the rest, after the first 6 months, she grew like a lark. She could walk and talk to in her own way before the heath blossomed a second time over Mrs. Linton's dust. Burp, she was the most winning thing that ever brought sunshine into a desolate house. A real beauty in the face. And with the Earnshaw's handsome dark eyes, with the Linton's fair skin. And small features, and yellow curling hair. Oh, her spirit was high, though not rough, and qualified by a heart sensitive and lively to excess in its affections. That capacity for intense attachments reminded me of her mother, but still she did not resemble her, for she could be soft and mild as a dove, but she still had a gentle voice and a pensive expression. Her anger was never furious. Her love never fierce. It was deep and tender. However, it must be acknowledged. She had faults to foil her gifts, a propensity to be saucy, was one, and a perverse will that indulged children invariably acquire, whether they be good-tempered or cross. If a servant chanced to vex her, it was always, "I shall tell Papa." And if he reprove her, even by a look, you would have thought it a heartbreaking business. I don't believe he ever speak a harsh word to her. He took her education entirely on himself and made it an amusement. Fortunately, curiosity and a quick intellect made her an apt scholar. She learned rapidly and eagerly and did honor to his teaching. Till she reached the age of 13, while we're just rifling past this. She had not once been beyond the range of the park by itself. Mr. Linton would take her with him in a mile or so outside on rare occasions, but he trusted her to no one else. Gimmerton was an unsubstantial name in her ears. The chapel, the only building she had approached or entered except for her own home. Wuthering Heights and Mr. Heathcliff did not exist for her. She was a perfect recluse, and apparently perfectly contented. Sometimes, indeed, while surveying the country from her nursery window, she would observe, "Ellen, how long will it be before I can walk to the top of those hills? I wonder what lies on the other side. Is it the sea?" No, Miss Kathy. I would answer. It's the hills again, just like these. What are those golden rocks, like when you stand under them? She once asked. The abrupt descent of Penistone crags particularly attracted her notice, especially when the setting sun shone on it and the topmost heights and the whole extent of landscape beside lay in shadow. I explained that they were bare masses of stone with hardly enough earth in the clefts to nourish a stunted tree. Why are they bright so long after it is evening here? She pursued. Because they're a great deal higher up than we are, replied I. You cannot climb them. They're too high and steep. In winter, the frost is always there before it comes to us, and deep into summer, I have found snow under that black hollow on the northeast side! Exclamation point. Oh, you bet on them! She cried gleefully. Then I can go too, when I am a woman. Has Papa been, Ellen? Papa would tell you, miss, I answered hastily, that they are not worth the trouble of visiting. The moors, where you ramble with them, are much nicer, and Thrushcross Park is the finest place in the world. Yeah, but I know the park, and I don't know those, she murmured to herself, and I should delight to look round me from the brow of the tallest point. My little pony Minnie shall take me some time. One of the maids, mentioning the fairy cave, quite turned her head with a desire to fulfill the project. Oh, she teased Mr. Linton about it, and he promised that he should have the journey when she gets older. But Miss Catherine measured her age by months, and now am I old enough to go to Penistone Crags? Was the constant question in her mouth. Well, the road thither wound close by Wuthering Heights, and Edgar had not the heart to pass it. So she received, as constantly, the answer, not yet, love, not yet. I said Miss Heathcliff lived above a dozen years after quitting her husband. Our family were a delicate constitution. She and Edgar both lacked the ruddy health that you would generally meet in these parts. What with her last illness was, and I am not certain, I conjecture they died of the same thing. A kind of fever. Slow at its commencement, but incurable, and rapidly consuming life toward the close. She wrote to inform her brother of the probable conclusion of her 4 months' indisposition under which she had suffered, and entreated him to come to her, if possible, for she had much to settle, and she wished to bid-a-ba-doo and deliver Linton safely into his hands. Her hope was that Linton might be left with him, and as he had been with her, his father, she would fain convince herself, had no desire to assume the burden of his maintenance or education. My master hesitated not for a moment in complying with the request. Reluctant as he was to leave home at ordinary calls, he flew to answer this, commending Catherine to my peculiar vigilance. My lord, what just happened to me right there? I think I had a stroke. In its abundance, with reiterated orders that she must not wander out of the park, even under my escort. She did not calculate on her going unaccompanied. He was away 3 weeks. The first day or two, my charge sat in a corner of the library, too sad for either reading or playing. In that quiet state, she caused me little trouble, but it was succeeded by an interval of impatient, fretful weariness. And being too busy and too old then to run up and down amusing her, I hit on a method by which she might entertain herself. I used to send her on travels round the grounds, now on foot, and now on pony, indulging her with a patient audience of all her real and imaginary adventures when she returned. The summer shone in full prime, and she took such a taste for the solitary rambling that she often contrived to remain out from breakfast till tea, and then evenings were spent in recounting her fanciful tales, and I did not fear her breaking grounds, because the gates were generally locked, and I thought that she could scarcely venture forth alone, and if she had stood wide open. Unluckily, my confidence proved misplaced. Catherine came to me one morning at 8 o'clock. And she said that she was that day an Arabian merchant, going across the desert with his caravan, and I must give her plenty of provision for herself and beasts, a horse, 3 camels, personated by a large hound and a couple of pointers. I got together a good store of dainties and slung them in a basket on one side of her saddle, and she sprang up as gay as a fairy, sheltered by her wide-brimmed hat and gauze veil from the July sun, and trotted off, with a merry laugh. mocking my cautious counsel to avoid galloping and come back early. Can you imagine a world where it's like, don't gallop. If you're gonna ride the pony, don't gallop. I can't imagine living in a life like that. The naughty thing never made her appearance at tea. One traveler, the hound, being an old dog and fond of its ease, returned, but neither Kathy nor the pony nor the 2 pointers were visible in any direction. I dispatched emissaries down this path, and that path, and at last went wandering in search of her myself. Well, there was a laborer working on a fence around the plantation on the borders of the grounds. I inquired of him if he had seen our young lady. I saw her at morn, he replied. She would have to cut her hazel switch, and then she left her galloway over the hedge yonder, where it's lowest, and galloped out of sight. Well, you may guess how I felt at hearing this news. It struck me directly that she must have started for Penistone Crags. Oh, what will become of her? I ejaculated, pushed through a gap, which the man was repairing, and making straight for the high road. I walked as if for a wager, mile after mile, till a turn brought me in view of the crags. Oh, the heights. Sorry, I just made that word up. But no Catherine could I detect, far or near. The crags, which is the next line under, right next to the word heights, and that's why I got confused, lie about 1.5 miles beyond Mr. Heathcliff's place, and that is 4 from the Grange. So I began to fear night would fall ere I could reach them, and what if she should have slipped in clambering among them? I reflected, and been killed or broken some of her bones. My suspense was truly painful, and at first it gave me delightful relief to observe in hurrying into the farmhouse Charlie, the fiercest of points, lying under a window, with a swelled head and a bleeding ear. Well, I opened the wicket and ran to the door, knocking vehemently for admittance. A woman, who I knew, and who formerly lived at Gimmerton, answered. She had been a servant there since the death of Mr. Earnshaw. Ah, said she, you are come a-seeking your little mistress. Don't be frightened, she's here safe, and I'm glad it isn't the master. He is not at home, then, is he? I panted, quite breathless with the quick walking and alarm. No, she replied. Both he and Joseph are off, and I think that they won't return to, this hour or more. Step in, and rest you a bit. I entered, and beheld my stray lamb seated on the hearth, rocking herself in a little chair that had been her mother's when she was a child. Her hat hung against the wall, and she seemed perfectly at home, laughing and chattering in the best spirits imaginable to Hareton, now a great strong lad of 18. Yes, who stared at her with considerable curiosity and astonishment, comprehending precious little of the fluid succession of remarks and questions which her tongue never ceased pouring forth. Very well, miss, I exclaimed, concealing my joy under the angry countenance. This is your last ride. Till Papa comes back. I'll trust you not over the threshold again, you naughty girl. Ah, Ellen, she cried gaily, jumping up and running to my side. I shall have a pretty story to tell tonight, and you found me out. Have you ever been here in your life before? Yeah, put that hat on and come home at once, said I. I'm dreadfully grieved at you, Miss Kathy. You've done extremely wrong. It's no use pounding and crying. That won't repay the trouble I've had scouring the country after you. Oh, to think how Mr. Linton charged me to keep you in, and you steal it off. So, it shows you are a cunning little fox. Yeah, and nobody will put faith in you anymore. What have I done? Sobbed she, instantly checked. Papa charged me with nothing. He'll not scold me, Ellen. He's never cross, like you. Come, I repeated. I'll tie the riband. Now, let us have no petulance. Oh, for shame, you 13 years old and such a baby. This exclamation was caused by her pushing the hat from her head and retreating to the chimney out of my reach. Nay, said the servant. Don't be hard on the bonny lass, Miss Dean. We made her stop. She'd fain have ridden forwards, a fear that you'd be uneasy. Hareton offered to go with her, and I thought he should. It's a wild road over those hills. Hareton, during the discussion, stood with his hands in his pockets, too awkward to speak, though he looked as if he did not relish my intrusion. How long am I to wait? I continued, disregarding the woman's interference. It'll be dark in 10 minutes. Where's the pony, Miss Kathy? Where's Phoenix? Oh, I shall leave you unless you be quick, so please yourself. The pony's in the yard, she replied. Phoenix is shut in there. He's bitten. So is Charlie. And I was going to tell you all about it, but you're in a bad temper and don't deserve to hear. Oh, I picked up her hat and approached it to reinstate it. But perceiving that the people of the house took her part, she commenced capering around the room. And on my grieving chase, ran like a mouse, over and under and behind the furniture, rendering it ridiculous for me to pursue. I've never seen a 13-year-old act like a 3-year-old. This is amazing. And rendering it ridiculous for me to pursue. Hareton and the woman laughed. And she joined them, and waxed more impertinent still, until I cried in great irritation, "Oh, well, Miss Kathy, if you are aware of whose house this is, you'd be glad enough to get out." "It's your father's, isn't it?" said she, turning to Hareton. "Nay," he replied, looking down and blushing bashfully. He could not stand a steady gaze from her eyes, though they were just his own. "Who's then, your master's?" she asked. Oh, he colored deeper, with a different feeling, muttered an oath, and turned away. "Who is his master?" continued the tiresome girl, appealing to me, and he talked about our house and our folk, and I thought he had been the owner's son. He never said, miss, he should have done, shouldn't he, if he's a servant? Hareton grew black as a thundercloud at this childish speech. I silently shook my questioner, and at last succeeded in equipping her for departure. "Now get my horse," she said, addressing her own unknown kinsman as she would one of her stable boys at the Grange. You may come with me, and I want to see where this goblin hunter rises in the marsh. Oh, to hear about the Ferishes, as you call them. But make haste. I'm not going to look that up, because I'm sure it's like the weird phonetic spelling of a common person where it's supposed to be all cute and quirky. I'm just not looking it up. What's the matter? Get my horse, I say. "I'll see thee damned before I be thy servant," growled the lad. "Oh, you'll see me what?" asked Catherine in surprise. "Damned, thou saucy witch," he replied. "But there, Miss Kathy, you see how you got into a pretty company," I interposed. "Nice words to be used on a young lady. Pray, don't begin to dispute with him. Come, let's seek for Minnie ourselves and be gone." "But Ellen," cried she, staring fixed in astonishment, "how dare he speak so to me? Mustn't he have had to do as I ask him? You wicked creature." "Yeah, I'll tell Papa what you said. Now then." Hareton did not appear to feel this threat, so the tears sprang into her eyes with indignation. "You bring the pony," she exclaimed, turning to the woman. "Let my dog free this moment." "Softly, miss," answered the address. "You'll lose nothing by being civil. Though Mr. Hareton there be not your master's son, he's your cousin, and I was never hired to serve you." "He, my cousin?" cried Kathy in a scornful laugh. "Yes, indeed," responded the reprover. Oh, Ellen, don't let him say such things," she pursued in great trouble. "Papa's gone to fetch my cousin from London, and my cousin is a gentleman's son. She stopped and wept outright, upset at the bare notion of relationship with such a clown. "Oh, hush, hush," I whispered. "People can have many cousins of all sorts, Miss Kathy, without being any worse for it, only they needn't keep their company if they be disagreeable and bad." "No, he's not. He's not my cousin Ellen," she went on, gathering fresh grief for reflection and flinging herself into my arms for refuge from the idea. Oh, I was much vexed at her and the servant for their mutual revelations, having no doubt of Mr. Linton's approaching arrival. Communicated by the former, being reported to Mr. Heathcliff, and feeling as confident that Catherine's first thought on her father's return would be to seek an explanation of the latter's assertion concerning her rude-bred kindred. Hareton, recovering from his disgust at being taken for a servant, seemed moved by her distress, and having fetched the pony round the door, he took to appropriate her, a fine crooked-legged terrier whelp from the kennel. Putting into her hand, bit her whist, for he meant naught, pausing in her lamentations. She survived him with a glance of awe and horror. then burst forth anew. I could scarcely refrain from smiling at this antipathy to the poor fellow who was well-made, athletic youth, good-looking in features, and stout, and healthy, but attired in garments befitting the daily occupations of working on the farm and lounging among the moors after rabbits and game. Still, I thought I could detect his physiognomy, a mind owing better qualities than his father ever possessed. Good things lost amid a wilderness of weeds, to be sure, whose rankness far overtopped their neglected growth, yet notwithstanding evidence of a wealthy soil that they might yield luxuriant crops under the other and more favorable circumstances. Mr. Heathcliff, I believe, had not treated him physically ill. Thanks to his fearless nature, which offered no temptation to that course of oppression, he had none of the timid susceptibility that would have given zest to ill treatment. In Heathcliff's judgment, he appeared to have bent his benevolence to making him a brute. He was never taught to read or write, never rebuked for any bad habit which did not annoy his keeper. And he never led a single step toward virtue, or guarded by a single precept against vice. And, from what I heard, Joseph contributed much to his deterioration by a narrow-minded partiality which prompted him to flatter and pet him as a boy, because he was the head of the old family, and he had been in the habit of accusing Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff when children, putting the master past his patience, and compelling him to seek solace in drink, but what he termed their offald ways. I hate when they do that. And so present, he laid the whole burden of Hareton's faults on the shoulders of the usurper and his property. If the lad swore, he wouldn't correct him, nor, however, culpability had behaved. He gave Joseph satisfaction, apparently, to watch him go to the worst lengths, and he allowed that the lad was ruined, that his soul was abandoned to perdition. But he had reflected that Heathcliff must answer for it. Hareton's blood would be required at his hands, and there lay immense consolation at that thought. Joseph had instilled in him a pride of name, and in his lineage, he would, as he dared, have fostered hate between him and the present owner of the Heights. But his dread of the owner amounted to superstition, and he confined his feelings regarding him to muttered innuendos and private communications. I don't pretend to be intimately acquainted with the mode of living customary in those days of Wuthering Heights. I only speak from hearsay, for I saw a little. The villagers affirm Mr. Heathcliff was near, and a cruel, hard landlord to his tenants, but the house inside had regained its ancient aspect of comfort under female management, and the scenes of riot common in Hindley's time were not now enacted within its walls. The master was too gloomy to seek companionship with any people, good or bad, and he is yet. This, however, is not making progress with my story. Miss Catherine rejected the peace offering of the terrier and demanded her own dogs, Charlie and Phoenix. They came limping and hanging their heads, and we set out for home, sadly out of sorts. Every one of us. I could not wring from my little lady how she had spent the day, except that, as I suppose the goal of her pilgrimage was Penistone Crags, and she arrived without adventure to the gate of the farmhouse, where Hareton happened to issue forth, attended by some canine followers who attacked her train. They had a smart battle before their owners could separate them. For the introduction, Catherine told Hareton who she was and there she was going, and asked him to show her the way, finally beguiling him to accompany her. He opened the mysteries of the fairy cave and 20 other queer places. By being in disgrace, I was not favored with such a description of the interesting object she saw. I could gather, however, that her guide had been a favorite till she hurt his feelings by addressing him as a servant. And Heathcliff's housekeeper hurt hers by calling him her cousin. And the language that he had held to her rankled in her heart, who she always loved, and darling, and queen, and angel, with everybody at the Grange, to be insulted so shockingly by a stranger. She did not comprehend it. At hard work, I had to obtain a promise that she would not lay the grievance before her father, and I explained how she objected to the whole household at the Heights, and how sorry he would be to find out she had been there. If I insisted most on the fact that if she revealed my negligence on his orders, he would perhaps be so angry that I would have to leave. And Kath could bear the prospect. She pledged her word, and kept it for my sake. After all, she was a sweet little girl. Chapter 19. A letter, edged with black, announced the day of my master's return. Isabella! She was dead. All the deaths just happened real fast. Just bam, they're dead. And he wrote to bid me get mourning for his daughter and arrange a room and other accommodations for his youthful nephew. Catherine ran wild with joy at the idea of welcoming her father back and indulged in most sanguine anticipations of an innumerable excellencies of her real, in quotes, cousin. The evening of their expected arrival came, and since early morning she had been busy ordering her own small affairs, and now attired in her new black frock. Poor thing. Her aunt's death impressed her with no definite sorrow. She obliged me, by consent to worrying, to walk her down through the grounds to meet him. Linton is just 6 months younger than I am, she chattered, as we strolled leisurely over the swells and hollows of mossy turf, under the shadow of trees. Oh, how delightful it would be to have him for a playfellow. Aunt Isabella sent Papa a beautiful lock of his hair. What? It was lighter than mine, more flaxen. You send hair ahead? I'm coming. Prepare yourself by looking at this lock of my hair. That's really weird. I have it carefully preserved in a little glass box. Weird. That's weird, too. And does she smell it? And I often thought what a pleasure it would be to see its owner. So weird. Oh, I am happy. And Papa, dear Papa, come, Ellen, let us run. Come, run. She ran and returned and ran again. Many times before my sober footsteps reached the gate, and then she seated herself on the grassy bank beside the path. She's 13. I've had 2 13-year-old girls at this point. They don't act like that. They just kind of sulk. 13-year-olds sulk. 13-year-olds don't run around like they're 7. They just kind of sulk. They just do a lot of like, hey, you still sitting in here reading your novels? And they go, fuck off, Dad. And you go, okay, well, dinner's going to be ready in a half hour. And they're like, I don't eat anymore. And it's like, okay, Jesus Christ. Well, anyway, so this one's like a 7-year-old. She could be still a minute. Oh, how long they are, she exclaimed. I see some dust on the road. They are coming. No. When will they be here? May they not go a little way? Half mile, Ellen, only half a mile. Oh, do say yes to that clump of birches at the turn. I refused, staunchly. At length her suspense was ended, and the traveling carriage rolled in sight. Ow! Ow! Miss Kathy shrieked and stretched out her arms as soon as she caught her father's face looking from the window. Ow! Ow! She descended, nearly as eager as herself. As a considerable interval elapsed, they had thought to spare for any but themselves. While they exchanged caresses, I took a peep in to see after Linton. Oh, he was asleep in the corner, wrapped in a warm, fur-lined cloak, as if it had been winter. A pale, delicate, effeminate boy, who might have been taken for my master's younger brother. So strong was the resemblance. But there was a sickly peevishness in his aspect that Edgar Linton never had. Oh, the latter saw me looking, and having shaken hands, advised me to close the door and leave him undisturbed, for the journey had fatigued him. Kathy would fain have taken one glance, but her father told her to come, and they walked together up the park, while I hastened before to prepare the servants. Now, darling, said Mr. Linton, addressing his daughter as they halted at the bottom of the front steps, your cousin is not so strong as to be merry as you are. He's lost his mother, remember, a very short time since. Therefore, don't expect him to play or run about with you directly, and don't harass him much by talking. Let him be quiet this evening, at least, will you? Yes, Papa, answered Catherine, but I do want to see him, and he hasn't once looked out. Oh, the carriage stopped, and the sleeper, being roused, was lifted to the ground by his uncle. Lifted by his uncle? Yeah, he's a feeble little boy. Oh, this is your cousin, Kathy. Does he say this as he's holding this adult child, just like presents it. This is your cousin, Kathy Linton, he said, putting their little hands together. She's fond of you already. And mind you, don't grieve her by carrying tonight. Try to be cheerful now. The traveling's at an end, and you have nothing to do but rest and amuse yourself as you please. Let me go to bed, then, answered the boy, shrinking from Catherine's salute, and he put his fingers to his eyes to remove incipient tears. Come, that's good, child, I whispered, leading him in. You'll make her weep, too. See how sorry she is for you. I do not know whether it was sorrow for him, but his cousin was put on a sad countenance as himself and returned to her father. All three entered and mounted to the library, where tea was laid ready. I proceeded to remove Linton's cap and mantle and placed them on a chair by the table. But he was no sooner seated than he began to cry afresh. Oh, God, my master inquired what was the matter. I can't sit on a chair, sobbed the boy. Go to the sofa, then, and Ellen shall bring you some tea, answered his uncle patiently. He had been greatly tried during the journey, and I felt convinced by his fretful, ailing charge. Linton slowly trailed himself off and laid down. Kathy carried a footstool and her cup to his side, and at first she sat silent. But that would not last, and she had resolved to make a pet of her little cousin. And she gonna have a bee, and she commenced stroking his curls, kissing his cheek, and offering him tea in her saucer, like a baby. All this pleased him, for he was not much better. He dried his eyes and lightened to her faint smile. So this is an older person acting like an infant, and you got a 13-year-old. Everyone's acting like babies in this story. Oh, yeah, he'll do very well, said the master to me after watching them a minute. Very well, if we can keep him, Ellen. The company of a child of his own age will instill new spirit into him soon, and by wishing for strength, he'll gain it. If we can keep him, I mused to myself, and sore misgivings came over me that there might be a slight hope of that. And then I thought, however will that weakling live at Wuthering Heights? Between his father and Hareton, what playmates and instructors there'll be. Our doubts were presently decided, even earlier than I expected, that I had taken the children upstairs after tea was finished, and seen Linton asleep, and he would not suffer me to leave him till that was the case. I had come down, and was standing by the table in the hall, lighting a bedroom candle for Mr. Edgar, when a maid stepped out of the kitchen and informed me that Mr. Heathcliff's servant Joseph was at the door, and he wished to speak with the master. I shall ask him what he wants first, I said, in considerable trepidation. A very unlikely hour to be troubling people, and the instant that they have returned from a long journey, I don't think the master can see him. Joseph had advanced through the kitchen as I uttered these words, and now presented himself in the hall. He was donned in his Sunday garments, and with the most sanctimonious and sourest face, and holding his hat in one hand and his stick in the other, he proceeded to clean his shoes on the mat. Good evening, Joseph, I said coldly. What business brings you here tonight? It's Maester Linton. I mun spake. I hate it when he talks. He answered, waving me disdainfully aside. Mr. Linton is going to bed, unless you have something particular to say, and I'm sure he won't hear it now, I continued. You better sit down in there and trust your message to me. Which is his ram? What does that mean? Pursued the fellow, surveying the range of closed doors. His room. I perceived that he was bent on refusing my meditation, and so reluctantly I went up to the library and announced his unseasonable visitor, advising that he should be dismissed till next day. Mr. Linton had no time to empower me to do so, for Joseph mounted close at my heels and, pushing into the apartment, planted himself at the far side of the table with his two fists clapped on the head of his stick, and began in an elevated tone as if anticipating opposition. Heathcliff has sent me for this lad, and I munn't go aback about him. Hate it. Edgar Linton was silent for a minute. An expression of exceeding sorrow overcast his features, and he would have pitied the child on his own account, but recalling Isabella's hopes and fears and anxious wishes for her son, and her commendations of him for his care, he grieved bitterly at the prospect of yielding him up, and searched in his heart how he might be avoided. No plan offered itself. And the very exhibition of any desire to keep him would have rendered the claimant more peremptory. Oh, there was nothing left but to resign him. However, he was not going to rouse him from his sleep. Tell Mr. Heathcliff, he answered calmly, that his son shall come to Wuthering Heights tomorrow. He's in bed. He's too tired to go the distance now. You may also tell him that the mother of Linton desired him to remain under my guardianship, and at present his health is very precarious. Noah, said Joseph, giving a thud with his prop on the floor and assuming the authoritative air. Noah, that means naught. Heathcliff makes Noah count o to mother, nor ye northerner. But he'll have his lad, and I mun take him. So now he gnaw. I hate this. You shall not tonight, answered Linton decisively. Walk downstairs at once and repeat to your master what I have said. Ellen, go show him. Go. And aiding the indignant elder with a lift of his arm, he rid the room of him and closed the door. Vera weel, shouted Joseph as he slowly drew off. To morn he come histling and thrust him out if ye dar. Oh, God, that's a horrible way to end a chapter. Well, we're done. Why don't we wrap up the longest episode I've ever recorded in my entire life and head down to the smoking room where we can both enjoy a cigarette and relax and talk about what the hell we just read. Now, there you are. Go on, get yourself settled, and grab yourself a Camel cigarette here in my smoking room amongst my cancerous birds. There they are, with their tiny little blackened lungs. Why don't we review the last, 4 chapters we just read, 16 through 19? The duality, it just keeps going. In the last couple chapters, we see that there are 2 Manners, Catherine's 2 lovers, Heathcliff's 2 lovers, his love and hate for Catherine. It's a duality. I caught that one. And now we've hit the point in the story that is split off into the story of young Catherine, and there's 2 manors that are now holding special purposes where Thrushcross Grange represents culture and high society, while Wuthering Heights is doom and gloom and crazy stuffs. Then you get into the kids that we're reading about. Kathy has the duality of her parents, where instead of being completely out of control and headstrong like her mom, she got a little bit of her dad to keep her grounded and more classy. And Linton is like his father in being overbearing and kind of a dick, but also weak and simpering like his mother. And we see the growing decline of Kathy's father, who still cares for her, though he's acting like he's pretty much done. He's just a matter of time for that guy's dead. Nellie is burnt out and sick of Kathy's shit. She's worrying about losing her job because Kathy keeps getting her in trouble by nearly trying to kill herself, and she's also worrying about the fact that she's going to kill herself. She keeps just going after those rocky cliffs by Wuthering Heights, those big tall rocks or whatever, which maybe could be another thing. I don't know. Wuthering Heights has the high rocks that Kathy is dying to get to, which is dangerous. It's going to kill her, showing that the manor is both dangerous but alluring and drawing her in like her mother was drawn to the dangerous and alluring Heathcliff. Or, I don't know, maybe I'm wrong. I mean, I think the author of any book probably, puts some thought into it, but not as much thought as us, the readers, start picking out of it. So, most likely she's like, okay, time to write about the kids. All this duality stuff might have been a coincidence. We'll never really know, because the person who wrote this died of drinking corpse water from a nearby graveyard. So, think about that when you go to bed tonight. And with that, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next week. Well, it appears you found me in the part of the podcast I hate the most, where I tell you all about the places on the internet where you can find me. You can tell I hate this because of the sound effects making it sound like a stormy night in the drawing room of the damned. Now, there's that. Are you cool? I like cool people. It's the reason why I got involved in this business to begin with, just to meet cool people, not losers. So if you're cool, feel free to go over to my website, nuzzlehouse.com, which just points you to my link tree. Everything's on the link tree. Just go to the link tree if you want to see where I am. And of course, link tree has the dumbest URL in the world. linktr.ee/nuzzlehouse. It's the dumbest thing. If you go to nuzzlehouse.com, it's just going to reroute you over there after giving you some weird error about it not being secure. I hate it. I hate the internet. But if you go there, you get to hear some of the other stuff that I and my wife work on, like the Radio Mystery Theater show, where we try to recreate the same show that used to be on in the 70s, but they don't make any episodes anymore. So we make our own, and we just steal all their commercials. And also, just in the curious mind, we made a Christmas album. If you go to our link tree, you can see that we made a Christmas album. It's the first thing we did after getting married, which I think everyone should do when they get married, is start talking about the Christmas album they're going to make. And we're working on a new show where we give relationship advice by reading paranormal smut. And since I think you might be cool, you can always just email me directly. glenn.nuzzles@gmail.com. But don't email if you're a nerdling or a dork. Now, back to business. I can't believe I drank all of them already. There's got to be one left.